All right, so we're going to record this so that everybody can see and refer to the things that aren't in the music that I sent. So Meg has been kind enough to send out the links to the 2 pieces of sheet music that I wrote for this. So if you were at last year's Melodeon workshop, we went over how to play Queen's Delight and how to put in some variations and things like that. This year I wanted to concentrate on playing minor tunes, which there are fewer of. And I remember when I first started playing accordion, I was very concerned when I hit an E minor tune for a number of months because suddenly everything didn't make sense. And I know maybe I'm just the only one, but so I wanted to talk a little bit about how I approach E minor tunes. And so I picked kind of the quintessential E minor tune, the Cuckoo's Nest, to go over. And I wrote out, like last year, I wrote out sort of the simple bare bones version, and then I wrote out sort of a fancier version. But I think what we'll do is just kind of I'll play through it a little bit, kind of talk about how I think about E minor, just mentally. And again, because the Melodeon to me is a very, very physical instrument, and it's a very directional instrument, and getting around is very, very relative to where you already are. So I will share. Well, let me just play the tune, the simple tune. Let me share my screen, actually. You should all be able to see that. Okay. Now I can't see myself, but oh yeah, I can. All right. I'm going to move I'm going to cut off my head here so you can see. So you can see my fingers, which is probably more interesting, anyways. So. And then Meg will. I'll be taking questions throughout, but so Meg will tell me. I'm not going to be watching the chats, but will tell me if I have specific questions during this. All right. So you can all see the screen. Yes. Nod. Okay. So I came up with this new notation. I'll explain it in a little bit, but for now, if you're just thinking about the melody, this is kind of the simplest version I could come up with. And of course, every tradition is going to do this a little bit differently. So there's a number of traditions that have Cuckoo's Nest to it. The one I probably have in my head, we do sort of a border version of Cuckoo's Nest with Pullman, is more or less this version, except I don't think there's a repeat in the second half. So well, that's actually a typographical error. But so for now, don't worry about the numbers. I'll explain. I'll review what these mean. This is the numbering system that I had from last year, which is bass button numbers. The notes the orange notes are cross row notes. So what I mean by that, and when we think about E minor is really this outer row primarily, which is very different from G major. When we were playing in G major last year, the inner row is sort of the home row. And I'll try to explain why some of this is this way. And again, there's a number of ways to do this, but this is just the way I do it. So I'm going to play this version. I'll just play through it, and then we can talk through parts of it. All right, so here we go. Oh, sorry. So the first thing you'll notice about, if you're not familiar with E minor, and if you try to play this tune, I think it's important to think about where you are and where the notes are on the E minor scale. So rather than starting with a G major, I'm going to contrast a lot of this with the way you play a G major tune. So G major starts with a push on the lowest note of the scale. These are your fundamental notes. Your 1, your 3, your 5, and your 1. E minor is almost the exact opposite. Sort of your fundamental direction is the draw, which is to pull out. And it's kind of hard for me to see here. Maybe I'll stop the screen share so I can see myself a little better, and then we'll go back to this share. All right. So, I can definitely see what I'm doing. So first, I would say find your E. So if you're playing along, and I encourage you to play along, find your E. And that's actually going to be the same if you were playing on the D row and playing it again, push is the kind of your home direction. It's the same. It's this D note, but it's just in the other direction. Okay, and so your kind of major your not major chords. Your most important notes are these next three, and then the high E. I actually like to reach up into this other row and play this. So you can see there is an E up here that doesn't feel quite as easy, and it's not as close. A lot of when you want to play Melodeon, excuse me, when you want to play Melodians, you want to work with you. It has an amazing range for buttons which are particularly close together. And thinking about how this all works, so I'm going to just walk up the E minor scale so you can think about all of the directions. And I encourage you to practice your scales a little bit. And it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it does help kind of lay out where things are. So first note is going to be a draw on this button. And you're going to change button and directions. Change direction. And then next button. Same direction, change button. Change direction. And then I like to go for this high E on this other row. And they kind of cross from each other, right? They're not quite, the buttons or most things are offset a little bit. So I'm just going to walk through that again. So it's going to be draw, push, draw, push, draw, draw, push, and then draw on the other row. And so practice that a couple of times. And if you're playing a scale, you have to kind of lift up your hand to do that. But if you're, again, just playing the chord, you just take your hand over and just play it. The other interesting chord is, of course, the D major chord, which you may know from playing other tunes. And that's just these 4 buttons in a row, starting with that home button. So another thing you can do is practice this. Practice your E minor chord. And then practice your D major chord. And these chords allow you to, again, know where you are, but it also allows you to add, if you think about where the chords are in relation to the music, it allows you to add and improvise a little bit as you get more comfortable with where all these notes are. The other chord that you probably already know is a G major chord, which is if you go to the inner row and you push on these 3 buttons, on the home button on the G major. We'll use that too. So E minor, D major, G major. Oh, sorry. Although if you slip up and push a button too low, it also works too as a G major chord. There's a couple of others, but you can also let the bass buttons do all the work there. So I'll just walk through the melody here so you can see how this works. Let me take a pause real fast. Am I going too slow? Am I going too fast? Am I going just about right? I see a thumbs up from Howard. Okay, great. Just taking the temperature of the room here. All right. So let's start. I'm going to walk through Cuckoo's Nest, and you should pull this up. Again, Meg has sent out the links to this music. I'm going to pull this up and just play it a couple of times and talk what I'm doing. So again, when you see a black note, you're on this home row, and you have to figure out the direction. So I don't specify the direction on here, okay? Because there's really only generally one direction on that home row. So the assumption is that if it's black, it's on this outer row. And if it's orange, it's on this inner row, okay? And I'll explain why I do. Sometimes you have a choice, and the choice depends on the chords you want to play with your bass buttons. So I'll get into that in a little bit. So I'm going to play through it again now, knowing where things are. So, and I'm just going to play the right hand, okay? Let's bring this down here. up to the inner row. That's all in the inner row. Back to the outer row. Reach down here for the A there. Back to the outer row. Inner row. Questions on that? Does that make sense? All right. If no questions, I will continue on. So the next thing to notice are the bass note buttons, and I'm going to walk through what that actually looks like on here. Depending on, so this is, some Melodeons have different sounds, or sorry, different button layouts. But if you take this button notation for the bass button is pretty much universal for a DG Melodeon. So no matter whether you have extra buttons or notes, I believe if you start at the bottom, 1, 2, this is your push is your G major chord, and draw is a D major chord. So this is going to be 1, 2, okay, and then 3, 4 is going to be the same bottom notes but on the inner bass buttons, okay. That may sound like that, or that may sound, if you have a third removal stop, or you don't, it will sound like this. Point of style, I like to play with thirds, usually when I play in E minor. It depends on what I'm doing, and I like to play with thirds when I'm playing for border tunes. It just kind of gives it more of a full, rowdy sound. But you certainly don't have to. And actually, I'm going to leave my thirds in because I think a lot of boxes don't have the ability to take the thirds out. So 1, 2, and the odd number button is always the bass note, and the even number button is always the chord that accompanies that bass note. So this is. And that's all 1, 2, 1, 2, changing direction, right? So this is almost like tablature in that it's telling you just press these buttons, and then the direction is indicated by there's really 3 things going on a Melodeon at any point in time, right? There's the row you're playing on, there's the direction you're playing on, and then there's the there's any, I'll call them reversals, or there's a lot to think about when it comes to playing the accordion. So the direction is indicated by that home row, right? That home row, and whether or not it's an orange button. Okay, and then you just put your bass fingers wherever those numbers are. So 5, 6 are now going to be the outer 2 upper notes. So that's going to be, these are actually your D major chord. So that's all 5, 6. 7, 8 are going to be those inner 2 rows, and this is your E minor chord, and your B. It may be, if you have thirds, it's going to be a B major chord. If you don't have thirds, it'll just be an open B chord. So, and because E minor, the home direction is the draw, the button E minor accompanies in the draw. So 7, 8 draw, and then push. So that's called a harmonic minor, when you have a B major rather than just the B minor chords. If you don't have a third, if you don't want that B major sound and you don't have a third button or a third removal, this is just a point of information, but you can actually you can fake a B minor sound by playing the 6 instead of the 8. And that's actually, if you know music theory, it's actually a B minor 7 chord. But sometimes you want that kind of minor sound, and if your Melodeon doesn't actually have that capability, it's a way to cheat. All right, so then this is actually fairly basic because this is primarily in the 7/8. So if you look at the first line, and it's all direction 7 8 7 8 7 8 5 6 5 6 5 6 7 8, and I'm just going between these 2 buttons, and it's just knowing where they are. Change. change, and then change. Change. So you have to think about whether you're in the inner, outer, which direction you're going, and where all the notes are. So it's a lot to think about. If you're feeling overwhelmed, I get it. Practice. And it's kind of like when I first started Morris dancing, I couldn't do anything with hankies.
Jonathan,
Yes.
we have someone asking if you can turn your mic volume up at all. They're saying it's really tough to hear you.
Okay.
They have their volume turned all the way up, so be louder, please.
So in general, or just the voice?
Just generally.
Okay. Is that a problem for anyone else? I can certainly do that. Let's see.
Is that any better?
Let's try that. How's that? Is that any better?
You sound louder here.
Okay. Is that loud enough, I guess is the question. I have lots of...
That's better. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Back to... Yeah, so that's 7/8, and again, this is the 7/8 and 5/6 are the predominant ones there. And if you start with that fingering with the E up here, you don't ever have to move your hand for the A part of this tune. It's all right there. Okay. So that's actually really nice. The B part's a little bit harder, right? Now we're venturing onto the inner row. We didn't talk about these notes, but let me move in. So they're going to be so the next B part is, and then go to the button above, and then change direction. So practice that. Let's do that one more time. Now you're going to reach behind. Okay, so you kind of have to know where that, and again, this just takes some practice getting where the notes actually are in relation to each other. So you're going to switch directions and reach behind to this note. And then you're going to press in. So let's try that. I'll show you again. Oops. One more time. So you could be saying, well, Jonathan, why are you doing all that when I have all of those notes on the outer row? Which I do. I could do... and it has to do with the left-hand chords that I'm going to show you in the more advanced version. So I'm a piano player at heart, and I always am thinking about chords. And so much of the choices that I make with my right hand are dictated by the chords that I want to play. And so in the advanced version, there's a G major chord on, which is only available to the Melodeon when you press these two buttons. And in order to make that work, if I were to try to, I don't have the same melody to make that chord work. So the chords that I want to choose often dictate the melody to me. But because I'm a piano player, this maybe doesn't work for you. I don't know. But like, I always think, even if I'm not playing those chords, I always think about if I wanted to play those chords, that just makes sense. Those chords are sort of outlined in the melody for me. So I have a tendency to jump back and forth. So in this case, and then I think about that as a D, basically a D major chord, which is, here's the D row, and then A is all in a draw direction. I didn't teach that part. So the last part, and then I reach, and I didn't teach you this A major chord, but this is here's the C sharp, and then here's the A. So it's kind of two down and one up. So if you find that, That's actually a really, really handy chord. And so your A major chord actually can be that. And if I reach the button right next to it, so these two, I have an A major chord. Remember we were talking about E minor chord, D, and of course G. And then A is, if I want to go further, I can throw the low E on it, which is down here. So I learned a lot of this. The reason I call this an advanced Melodeon workshop is I learned a lot of these tricks from Saul Rose when I was at Sidmouth a couple of years ago. And he was going really fast, and he would always say, "Oh, but this is the advanced Melodeon workshop, so you won't have any trouble." Although we were all hanging on by the skin of our teeth. But this is being recorded, so you can always go back and review. So I will just play the melody on the right hand on the B part. Just the part that's different. I'm not going to go through the little tail, which is exactly the same as the A part. So and then play along, and if you get it, then great. And if you don't, let me bring this down. Then go practice. All right, we're going to start on this note. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's try that again. 3, 4. I'm trying to not let my fingers get in the way, so I apologize if that isn't very clear. All right. Let me try it one more time. 3 and 4. And I find that the bellows direction is the thing that becomes automatic. Like I'm not even thinking about which direction I end up going, because after you practice your scales and you kind of get where things are, then you just stop thinking about bellows direction, generally speaking. All right, so I'm going to play through. Let's play through the simple version of the Cuckoo's Nest. And if you can get the chords while you're doing this, great. If not, again, something to practice. We'll just put it all together, and I'll play it twice. How's that sound? And how are we doing on time? Okay, 11:45. So we're about halfway through, so that's probably pretty good. All right, here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Let's do it again. All right. How's that feeling? Good? Not bad? All right. Volume still good, Howard? Okay.
Good enough. Yep.
Good enough. All right.
Yeah, I can't quite keep up, but this is a good pace.
Okay. Good.
I'm getting most of it.
All right. Shall we switch over to the advanced version? All right, and I'll talk about and a lot of what I have to do. Like I've written it down as once, and don't take it as the rule or anything like that. So it's more like this is just one way to play this tune. And then last year I said, right hand twiddles. Let me share this again. And yeah, I call them twiddles. So where does my cursor go? Oh, here it is. Okay. Share. All right. So here we are at the advanced version, or I think as we called it, as the less simple version. And you'll notice that actually there are more orange notes here. And the reason for that is, again, I want to play different chords. So if I want to make it a little bit less basic, because for the most part, what we did the last time was we just played, primarily on these two notes. But you can do other things. So for instance, I can put a G major chord in on the A part. Gives it a little bit of a different sound, right? And I can play some lead up chords. So like if you look over the first ending there, adds a little gravitas to the situation, right? So maybe it's the last time and everybody's coming through, and you want to kind of like give the tune a little bit of a boost to that last time. So you could reach down to the 3/4 and play a C major chord there. It sounds really cool, right? There are not a whole lot of differences here, but what you'll see is more, again, when you practice those chords, because your fingers are already kind of thinking about where I am, you can just kind of play either all or some or, of those notes while you're there. So you'll see things like, so I can play a G major chord like this, or I can play it, like this with an extra, with a D down on the bottom. Oh yeah, so again, the weird thing about Melodeon is that most Melodians, Ds are only a push note, and Es are only a draw note. You won't find, unless you have some funny little reversals some places. Now, you might have a reversed D down here, depending on the box. But this is where things start to deviate from the standards. So I'll play this one time, and then I'll kind of show you what that sounds like. All right, 3, 4, and oh yeah, right. This part's basically the same. Sorry. Oh, my stop went in again. So let's try that with the full stop again. There's not a whole lot of difference to this one. I like to point out that the other thing in this one at the little tail, the A part, you can get a B minor sound, which is really cool, by doing a 7/6 as opposed to a 5/6, which is what we were doing before. And that's that little B minor cheater chord. I can do an open D if I don't have a third, with just these two. Or I can be guaranteed to be minor and do it this way. So, yeah, and then you can see that I added some chords, like, and I can either add a little twiddle like that, or I can play some extra chords. there's one more chord I'm going to show you. That's a C minor chord. I'm going to stop. C major chord. Sorry, C minor. Wow. Where am I? Yeah, stop the screen share. Okay. So C. Okay, so C is depending on what this note is on a draw. If this is a D for you, this is the one reverse D you have, and that's handy. But some, I think the Serenellis all have a C. This is a this is a Saltarell, also has a C. That's a C major chord. So this one, and then these two, and then back here. So you can, or you can just play these three, which is all definitely C major. Just leave that bottom note off. So again, D major, so C, D, E minor, G major. Those are the, oh, and then there's a version of A major, which is like this, or like this. So, I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure out a way to actually have a, it's a little difficult to write out the notation for that, but I'm going to, maybe I'll try to put that on the website just so I can have chord reference charts. I started doing this last year and then I got distracted. So, maybe this year I'll actually complete that. But, you know, if you're not sure, just, I would say, try, you know, either reviewing the video or just figuring out for yourself where it actually feels right and sounds right. So, let's see, what else? Yeah, and then it just becomes a question of what you want to do when it comes to affecting the dance, right? So, I guess points of style, which I think I talked about last year. You'll notice that when I played both of these versions, I actually swing this tune pretty hard. It doesn't. You're not hearing. Which is a perfectly fine way to play it, right? So it just kind of depends on, I think, the effect you want to play, and it may depend on the tradition whether that works. But a little bit dotted kind of gives it a little bit more of a little bit more of a swing to it. Bass buttons, again, usually, and we might already all know this, but it's not just all short and it's not just all long. If you just play them all along, it can be really a lot, and the rhythm gets mushy. So a lot of the kind of the standard way I want to think about this is, so I kind of compromise usually, which is with the long bass note and then a short chord. And I give it a little bit of a kick on the offbeats, because I find that also steadies the rhythm, but it also kind of gives it a little bit of an excitement. So you can play quite slowly if you give a rhythmic kick to the offbeats, but also very energetically. So if I just were to play this straight, it'd be. If I give it a kick. It gives it a little bit. It kind of propels the dancers a little bit. So, I find that helps. I'm trying to think what else to talk about. Are there other questions or other things people want to discuss or play? I suppose we could always go back to the things we played last year too, if people are so inclined. You're all a quiet bunch today. All right, let's see. Well, we have another 20 minutes or so. I don't know if we wanted to let's just play the advanced version or the simple version a couple of times. maybe a little bit more, maybe slightly faster, just so you can play along. So pick the one you're going to do. I'll play the chords I'll play more or less the advanced version here, but it's up to you. So we'll do it. I don't know. Let's do it 3 times. Okay. All right. 1 and 2 and 3. I forgot to show my hands there, but hopefully you've figured it out. I like to end. I often like to end tunes like that. And again, knowing where that is makes it really simple. So, all right. Do you want to play anything else? Do you want to leave early? That's cool too. Let's see. Meg, anything other comments? Or are we pretty good here?
No, there wasn't anything else in the chat. Are Melodeon players likely to run into other minor keys besides E minor in the common Morris repertoire?
That's a good question. So well, there are some A minor tunes, although I think E minor is probably the most common one. And then A minor is kind of the analog on the G row. So like you can play. I'm trying to think of an A minor tune. Yeah, you can play A minor. I don't know that I've seen it a whole lot. Or you can transpose, but yeah. Again, because right, it's a D and G. You can play in D and G, and the relative minors of those are E minor and A minor. I do think it's kind of interesting that like predominantly
Mia looks like she's got a question.
Oh,
she's waving a finger at us.
Okay. Or yeah.
I don't think that's right because A minor comes from C major.
A minor comes from. Yeah. Oh, they're not relative. I'm sorry. You're right. They're not actually relative, but they are, I'll say, second degree. So, so G major, so E minor, and this is very true in the whistle as well. So if you ever play whistle, they're all the same note. They just start in a different spot.
I have a question. Yeah, like somebody with music theory explain that to me.
Mm-hmm.
As I've always, from piano lessons, I've always learned, A minor is the C. So is the A minor that ties in with G, is that like because it's got the sharp in there? Does that make it like some sort of harmonic minor or? Okay,
yeah. So that's probably why. Yeah, I guess relative is relative, right? So when I say relative minor, most I'll call them, for lack of a better term, folk minors, particularly from
Vulcan miners.
folk minors are actually Dorian. So you have a raised 6, which the 6th scale degree is actually a. So in this case, we were playing an E minor, but if you were to look up on a piano and play the relative minor of the relative minor of E minor is in fact G, right? So that works, but we didn't play any C naturals. Did you notice that, right? We were playing C sharps. So C sharp is actually E Dorian. Although if you walk around and say, let's play this one in E Dorian, everyone's like, what did you just say?
Well, I mean, like sometimes I'll play with like blues people or like other people, so I can at least let them know, like, I mean, but if they just say E minor and I play along, it pretty much works.
It does.
Until we run into the 6th. But the 6th in the blues scale has like weird notes thrown in there anyway.
Although harmonically it works differently too. So
Okay.
a lot of times, so most of the time you're hearing we're going E minor and then D major, as opposed to if it were, I'll say, a much stronger harmonic E minor, you would. Oh, hang on. Which works, right? And there's certain tunes that do that, but for the most part, you're hearing, as opposed to, you're not hearing that. So, yeah. But a lot of times, and I think that's true, so the tunes, so the Dorian tune is I guess, the related key, maybe it's not a relative key, to the major. So for G major, that is A minor, and for D major is E minor, E Dorian, and and A Dorian, right?
I'm a Dorian, you.
Yeah, right, something like that. It's funny. I've dealt with just so many different. I was a classical musician for many years, and I don't even think about this a whole lot, and I just mostly think about that as minor now because that's what everybody calls it, right? Even though it's technically Dorian. Other questions? Observations? What's it? Has anyone played this? Do they play this in their traditions at all? And I like I said, I know this from a border tradition.
I play this on a tabor pipe, but I haven't played it on the Melodeon before.
Yeah, I play it on Melodeon all the time, but this guy in my team just throws in all these weird crunchy chords that really sound bad.
This guy, me.
Oh yeah, and I thought you looked familiar.
Well, and that's probably why you showed up, right? Is to figure out what the heck I'm doing all the time.
Yeah,
so now you can practice, and we can be playing the. Yeah,
I think I'm just going to have to watch your left hand a lot more than I usually do.
Yeah, and mostly this is what I do actually. So in the advanced version,
I learned how to play with Malley's Melodeon methods.
Yeah,
and this is one of the first minor ones that he charts out with going kind of around the circle on the left hand with chords, and so I played that super slow until I got it, and the version in that one doesn't match the chords that you do or the push-pull pattern necessarily.
It probably doesn't, no, because a lot of this I just figured out on my own. So, yeah. Although I don't have the Malley's technique books, but I have the Malley's repertoire books, which are really fun, by the way.
I'll have to steal them from you.
Malley's was one of the first. So, like, if you look at like the Bacons, they were done in a key that the tunes in Bacon were done in a key that nobody really plays in, and Malley's, from what I understand, was really the first to say, these are the tunes, and this is the way. I think it was done in the 80s, right? These are the tunes and the keys that they're basically played in for practical purposes, right? Mm-hmm. And they're basically Melodeon keys, and they even break the same tune out via a number of different traditions. So, but they're a great book, and it seems like that a lot of that still holds today. So, I definitely recommend getting the Malley's Cotswold Morris 1 and 2. I think is there a border one? I'm not sure. There's a Northwest one as well, but I don't.
There is. There's a border one.
We don't have the border one.
Well, Father's Day is coming soon.
Oh, that's true. Father's Day. Yeah, I don't know if we can get it from the UK in time, but but I played 2 versions of this, and one is, I think we do. It's it's a Pullman tradition we've recreated from Filkins, which is it's a double jig, and I've seen Miriam and Nadia dance this quite a bit. And then the other version is we call it the border version. I don't know if it's definitive, but yeah, this is basically the border version. But the double jig has some slows, which is basically just playing it at halftime. For our slows go like. And then but I'm trying to think what other traditions is in, but it does seem like it's pretty common, and you hear it quite a bit. So, all right. Well, there's no reason to keep everyone here.
Hang on, one more question in the chat. Do you have a version with an accidental in it?
Do I have a version with an accidental in it? You mean for this tune? Are you thinking about this? I'm not sure which accidental you're talking about.
You want to unmute and ask, Mia? Go ahead.
Sorry, it's noisy because I'm in the car. I thought there was a version. I thought I had heard it with an accidental in the B part somewhere. I'm not sure what note it would be. I usually am thinking a different thought.
That one?
So like,
yeah, maybe it's that one. Let me see if so not all.
That way, or?
Yeah, I have two little accidentals up here, which actually produces 4 notes because direction. Let me see if I can do that. Oh, there we go. So that's going to be, I didn't even think about that. So if you have a D sharp, it's going to sound like this. And it's probably going to be a draw. This is where the accidentals aren't necessarily standard, so you're going to have to just find your own. How would I play the chords there? Oh, that's a good question. So it's a draw, but I don't have a B. My B is in this direction. So that, again, this is part of figuring this out. I might actually just have to play that quiet or without a chord. So I could do that, where I just leave the bass note out. See, this is what I mean by it being positional. I don't actually know where anything is until I sort of figure out how do I wander my way through. It's like a labyrinth, you know. And then you could stylistically just leave off the bass note, and then you can do the same thing on the second part of that. So what I just did. Let's see if I can do it again. So dun dun bum ching ba ching dun dun, and then I can do it in the same. And then it doesn't sound like I have a limitation of my Melodeon. It just sounds like I'm making a musical choice to leave that bass note out, despite the fact that I actually don't have that bass note in that direction. So it's sort of like, you know, making an intentional mistake, right? Where you're just like, well, the limitation of the instrument makes me shape that whole thing. Yeah, so if you are fortunate or blessed to have accidentals, it's always fun to, although you probably wouldn't just, you would probably play the whole tune that way. You probably wouldn't just, like, change it up between, you know, go rounds of the tune, because if you're playing with other people, they just look at you funny. Like, that's not a compatible, like the version of the tune probably either has the accidental or it doesn't. And if you're playing with fiddle players, it's fine. Or, you know, just, you know, to make friends, make sure that you're all talking about that sort of thing. If that makes sense. Cool.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, because I play it with that accidental on the tabor pipe, but I don't have an accidental on this Melodeon. So
I think a lot of Melodiums don't have them. My first Melodeon didn't have them, and I couldn't take out the third. So this one's a little bit more flexible. I'm trying to think. There's other tunes, I think. my thought is Simon's Fancy is kind of another E minor one that is hard to play with the it's hard to play with the C sharp. So I think a lot of people play it with a C natural. So and it's another E minor one I could have taught today. Now you can play it with a C sharp, but it's more to think about. And if you're playing it with a whistle player, they're probably going to play something that is sort of kind of a C sharp, but maybe sort of a sharp C natural. So a part of it's just knowing either and knowing how the other people are going to play it, so that you can try to match it. So, yeah. Oh, and then the B part to that is so the Melodeon version is. But the way, if you're playing with a whistle player, let me see if so sometimes you just have a choice, and sometimes the choice that the other people play is much harder for you. So, yeah. That depends on who plays the loudest. Fortunately, Melodians are pretty loud, so you can just play over anybody that's doing anything that's too hard. I'm just joking. So, all right. Cool. Any other questions?
I was just going to say that Simon's Fancy is another example of a minor tune that's really common in the Midwest repertoire, at least. I would say most teams probably dance that. Is the scale and the chord constructions that you talked about today, are those the same ones that you can use to figure that tune out?
Oh, that's a good question.
Or are there any little tweaks that we should, because you were just talking about C sharps.
Yeah. So again, the same notes apply. So it's not just for Cuckoo's Nest. This is G, A major. There's one I didn't teach you, which is B minor. Zoom in on this here. So B minor there's a couple of ways to do. I like to do this one, and then that again, whether you have thirds or not, you can do this or this. So that's 2 notes up at the top. Actually, you can do B minor either way. So B minor has a B and a D and an F sharp in it. So the D, it's a push, but so you can do it this way or you can do it this way, because you have 2 different Ds in the same direction. And if you also have this D. So depending on where you are, that's a good one to know, because B minor kind of soft resolves to E minor. So in terms of the C sharp versus the C natural, the C sharp is on the outer row and the C natural is on the inner row. And they don't mix. And that's because D major only has C sharps in it and G major only has C naturals in it. So depending on what you're doing, you're going to, if you're like, oh, I have to play this C sharp, again, you're limited by literally this note and maybe that note. But if what you have are C sharps, you have to be on this row. So, again, a lot of it comes down to planning and just kind of working around, again, the limitations of the direction and the rows that you have.
So does the push-pull pattern for the E minor scale also apply to the other minor scale found on your other row?
Let's think about that. Maybe. I think so. So the push-pull for a G major row is push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, pull, push. For the E minor row, it's pull, push, pull, push, pull, pull, push, pull. So the double pull is a note earlier, if that makes sense. Right there. And let's see if that's true in A minor. So for A minor, yes, that's exactly the same. So again, that's pull, push, pull, push, pull, pull, push, pull. So again, this is why I think the minors are a little mind-bendy when you first, because it's like everything you've learned about where everything is positionally in the major keys is essentially almost reversed, but not quite reversed. It's like, oh right, it's pull rather than push, but things are a little different. And then the button switches are in a slightly different spot. And then what's really maddening about the Melodeon is that when you go to the second octave, the button switches are on the different notes, right? So like, and I still haven't really worked my brain around this, but this is pull and switch, right? Pull, switch, pull. So between the first and the second scale degree, you're switching note buttons, right? And then up here, oh wait, sorry, other way around. So I push and I pull, and I don't switch between the first and scale to second degree. Up here I do. So I push, and then I switch buttons and directions, and that trips me up every time because I don't play a lot up here, and that's also true in the D row. It's different than, because it's press, press, press versus press, 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 press. So I don't know who invented this thing. I think they were crazy, but you know, someone said it's sort of like, I don't play guitar, but someone said guitar is one of those instruments that doesn't seem to make sense until you really kind of learn what everything is, and then all of a sudden everything starts to make lots of sense. And so I feel like that's the same thing with the Melodeon, where it's like none of this seems to make any sense, and then you realize that so many of the chords and G and D are really complementary keys because they work really well together, because in one direction, almost, but not always, the push in one direction is the pull in the other, right? So a D, the difference is a D and an E, right? Ds are always push and E's are always pull. But like F sharp, for instance, F sharp is a pull on the G row, and it's a push on the D row. And that's handy because you can do those reversals I was talking about by picking the chords and where you want to play, how you want to, chord the tune depends on which row you're on, which is just a totally backwards way of thinking about it compared to everything else, right? So it's one of those reasons I think I actually really like the Melodeon, because it's challenging and there's just all these dark corners. So cool. Any passing thoughts or anything else? Great. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you at one of the other events, hopefully.